Greetings, ladies and mental gents, and welcome to my channel, where I like to make audio narrations of various stories from the internet. In this video, we will be focusing on a story from the subreddit HFY, called Food for Thought, Part 18, Beginning of the End. Written by Level 25 Human Nerd. The link to the original will be down below in the description, and, as always, I hope that you enjoy. They watched, helpless, confused, as Alex desperately fought to keep Ithilia alive. Snitchell felt only sorrow and pity. Recklow smouldered with anger, but said nothing. He was a strong warrior, but he was human. He did not know their ways. It was wrong to prolong the warrior's suffering. Better to give him a quick, clean death, free of pain and fear. But they simply stood and watched. They accepted Alex's grief-laden anger silently. They heard Ithilia speak of the Great Plain, the eternal hunt, and the warriors found peace in the afterlife. Then there was silence. Recklow bowed her head and lifted her voice to lead the song. Ithilia had been seen a glory of the plain in the final moments. It was only right that they do what they could to guide his soul to that place. Carried on their voices, Alex was silent as the others joined her. Voices filling the control chamber with remembrance. Walked now the path. Walked the peaceful way, with the head high and scales unburdened with dust. May your claws feel the touch, the ever-flowing waters around them. May your blade hang eternal over the hearth of your brood. Walk now the path, O honored lost. May the warm sun carry your steps ever forward. May you never know the cold dark of your bones. We sing to you now, O honored lost. We sing your name until our lungs are empty, and the others sing it for us. We sing to you now, O honored lost, so that you may walk off forever forward, unburdened by blade and shield, and free of worry for what lies beyond. For as we sing, you may know we are not forgotten, and your deeds light the path for us to follow. She saw Snatchell move towards Alex, a hand to comfort him laid on his shoulder, but he refused her care with a jerk of his body. The human stood and gave orders as a commander should, but Recklow felt a chill in his voice. Gone was the warmth and friendship. Recklow shielded her face as the human suited boosted up onto the level above. Red Alpha, wait! She called after him, moving to the stairs to try and catch up. Snitchell was on the move as well, but she gestured for the other female to stay and see to the others. Red Alpha, Alexander. She tried again, but he was not listening. She brought her arm up again, and the door was blown in, and a second roar of the jets and dust blew away, leaving an empty hole where he had just stood. Scalorot and snow, she cursed, waving the air around, coughing with each step forward. The human was acting on rage, anger, and lust for retribution. She herself had been forced to learn that there was no room in her heart for honor when it was filled with such toxins. She only hoped that the human would not pay for a similar lesson with his life. She checked her weapon and made her way down the hall. It was a lesson that he needed to learn. She would not let him stand alone. Blade met blade in a harrowing song of death. The armored human and the battle-scarred Sabari danced back and forth with a grace and speed both born from experience. Rek held a clear advantage in strength and reach, the long, heavy war blade spinning in a tight, sweeping arcs, lashing out at the human from time to time. His tail flitted with a bladed harness and gave him a second weapon where he could bring in at any time. Alexander was fast and augmented by the mechanics of his armor and the surge of stimulants and chemicals coursing through his system. The human dashed in and out of range, swiping and stabbing with the wrist-mounted blades, the bright yellow glow of the heated metal hissing through the air with each movement. A snarl rose from the reptilian war chief. A scent of burnt flesh rose in the air, and the two disengaged. Rek bore a new scar across his chest. The blackened line of burnt flesh went smouldering a little as a deep chuckle rolled over his throat. So, the demon has fangs. Good, good. He brought his weapon back up and stalked back in, more controlled and cautious now. Alex raised his hands into a boxing stance, and he came in hard and fast, jabbing and striking where he could, forcing the chief into a defensive at first. Then the tail lashed around, hitting him in the side and throwing him off balance. A hard hook threw him to the floor, and he barely managed to get the taloned feet up in time to grab the Zabari mid-lunge and send him against the wall behind. Both combatants scrambled to their feet and came together again. And again, and again, and again. Each clash a mess of claw, steel, flesh, and blood. Strike, defend, counter, strike, counter, defend. The rules of battle wore away with each blow, the duel devolving into a melee, then a brawl, then a sheer mad struggle. Both males were sure that only one thing. One of them would die here, and there could be only no other way. There could be no compromise. For all of his training, for all of his ideals, and the engineered biology, high-tech armor, and augmentations, here, in this moment, Alexander was a little bit more than another animal. A primitive mammal intent on surviving against a larger predator. A human. So he did what humans did best for so long. He endured. The Zabari struck him again and again, unable to land the most blows, and a few that he did connect with were shifted aside or simply absorbed by the suit. He was stronger, bigger, more fierce, but his energy was draining quickly. His physiology suited for sudden but brief bursts. The human was made for the long haul, and it was beginning to show. When Reclo burst into the room, rifle raised, she watched the traitor staring down the slow and stagger. She saw the heavy war blade lagging a bit with each strike. She saw an opening, and so did Alex. The human pushed forward, taking the hard strike to the side and ignoring his alerts on his HUD. The human moved inside the reach of the war blade and jabbed forward, with the heated blades mounted on his wrists, stabbing wildly into the Zabari's side and gut. The stench of burnt flesh creeping through the helmets filtered, and the pain snarling of his foe filling his ears. Heavy claws scraping and grabbed at him, but he kept stabbing, kept pushing, kept punching, until his own cry of rage drowned out that of the chief. Finally, Alex pushed the weight off of the other male away. He watched as the body slumped down onto the floor, its midsection a mess of charred flesh and flowing blood. He panted and held still a moment, watching the slow and ragged rise and fall of the alien's chest. The alien weakly writhed on the floor, desperately clinging to the last vestiges of life. Alex stepped forward, ready to end it fully, when a hand held onto his shoulder. Reclo shook her head when he turned to face her, the red haze starting to fade from his vision. It is over. Let him die a traitor's death. Alexander stared for a moment slowly and began to nod when the dying chieftain coughed and choked through her breath. Who are you, demon? You who clings to the ways of the matriarchs. Reclo snarled at the fallen pirate and stood between the two. Heed his name well, dishonored beast. Remember it, for you shall hear it whispered in fearful pleas of the frozen dark. He is Alexander of the brood Krevnikov, warrior of earth, dread elder of the war pack Hestra, bore the war grave blood of many, she declared proudly, tail thumping on the floor. Rek eyed the female and then looked at the armored human. His jaw opened and closed silently before his body fell limp with a final and violent shudder. Alex stared at the corpse for a long moment and then turned away, walking back down the hall to join the others and report in. He was tired, his body ached, and he struggled against the damaged armor that encased him. Reclo watched him leave and then took up the chieftain's warblade and moved the corpse, taking the head off with a clean drop of the blade. She carefully wrapped it in one of the clan banners slung on the wall and moved to follow her dread alpha out. The war pack watched as the dropships from both the human vessels and the Blood of Mary landed in the open plains nearby, disgorging troops to finish clearing the facility proper and hunt for survivors. High above, the three large capital ships could be seen hanging in low orbit, with the Shazarad missing. One of the shuttles touched down close by, a human officer stepping out along with a medical team to meet them. Warpack Hestra, Major Scott Roberts, you will be debriefing aboard the UCH warship Tsar Nicholas after a medical evaluation and recovery. Petty Officer Krevnikov, you will be debriefed separately by Moses. This way, please. The Sapari were glad to hear that rest was what awaited them now, and they were quick to file aboard the ship and into the waiting attentions of the corpsmen standing by. Alex remained silent the whole time, eyes distant, though the mention of the intelligence service wanting to speak to him personally left a new pit in his stomach that settled in with the others that he was harboring. Then the rest of the warpack talked amongst themselves, speaking of the glories that awaited them back on the ship and the honor that they had accrued in the battle. Recklow watched Alex from time to time, her concern growing as she tried to figure out how to help the human, but each idea falling flat, if no other reason than the simple fact that he was a human, and she was not. A glance over its natural, a shared look between the two females, confirmed that Recklow wasn't the only one. As the shuttles touched down and the main hangar of the Tsar Nicholas unloaded its cargo, the warpack was greeted by the waiting envoy of officers, both Sabarian and human. Amongst the group he saw the shipmaster and Captain Bendon, both looking eager to speak with the survivors, but before they could approach, a team of engineers led by an official wearing a black uniform and a minimal decoration approached and quickly herded Alex away from the others. The Sabari were quick to protest, but a quick gesture from both Alex and the assurances from the officials calmed them enough to let them go. Alex walked through the familiar disassembly process for the Harpy suit, answering the usual post-mission questions from the techs, letting the medic look him over and signing over the equipment to the quartermaster. After accepting a painkiller for the bruises and agreeing to the full exam later, he was escorted to the empty briefing room and elsewhere on the ship and told to wait. Petty Officer sat straight and silent. There was a clock, but he didn't pay it much attention. The table before him was plain stainless steel, and the chair he sat in was just a smidge too short to be comfortable. The lighting panels overhead were dimmed, and the hollow emitter sat cold and dark. The room felt too large without the usual crowding of chairs and the troopers that the room was meant to hold for briefings. It wasn't his first time in a room like this, waiting for a plain-clothes intelligence officer to talk him through the after-action report. But it was the first time he sat there wondering if it would be his last. He thought through the events of the past weeks, of his mission with the Sabari and the actions that he took over the past 48 hours. Officially, he'd been sent in as a cultural liaison from humanity. His orders were to serve as one of the Blood of Many's cooks and learn of the Sabari culture and customs while sharing his own. Unofficially, he had been sent away to keep him out of combat, to protect him from the assets of the UCH Void Fleet, both from political interference and himself. His orders had been clear. Cook, observe, report. Do not engage in combat activity, except in an instance of self-preservation. He could perhaps argue that it was self-preservation, but one look at the combat logs from the Harpy would send that claim down the drain really quickly. Alex came to the realization that he, frankly, didn't care. His career didn't matter, and, if he was being honest with himself, his life had become a proper mess. What he did care about was his new friends, one of whom was dead, and instead of being with the others, he was sitting and waiting for the Mysos handler. After some time, the door finally opened, and the expectant suit stepped in, sat down and spent a good few minutes rifling through the folder of paperwork. Krebnikov, Alexander, Petty Officer First Class, Culinary Specialist Void Class, assigned to Special Operations out of the Academy due to your, unique nature. Served with distinction until the end of the Dystria conflict. Specialization transfer granted by Captain Sigurdsson. Transferred to Fleet Headquarters on Mars at the request of Lieutenant Robert LaForest, the Chief Petty Officer. After the Olympus Mons incident, you were transferred to Fort Halifax Academy as an instructor before being reassigned by the Diplomatic Corps for services aboard the Sabari warship Blood of Many. The man closed the folder and looked up at Alex, meeting his eyes for a long moment before sitting back with a deep sigh. I am not going to lie, Mr. Krebnikov. Alex suppressed a flinch at the lack of rank. There are some very unhappy people who want you court-martialed for what you pulled. Your orders were to avoid combat, and almost the first thing you do is suit up and dive out of a shuttle alone into a very hostile piece of terrain. Alex remained silent. I've read your profile, Alexander. All of it. All the way back to Dr. Krebnikov's first experiments. Frankly, I agree with Fleet Command. Despite your exemplary service record, you've proven yourself to be a high-risk individual, and keeping you in your current position would be both dangerous and irresponsible. It is only a matter of time before your emotional state destabilizes to the point of being an immediate danger to yourself and others. You need help, Alexander. Still nothing. The man shook his head, watching Alex sit there. Fine then. If you're not going to even bother to explain your actions, then it makes my job a lot easier. You're on standby until further notice. Report to the med bay for your physical. I am scheduling you for an early psych eval. Any questions? No, sir. The intel officer was almost surprised to hear the trooper reply, but simply waved him off with a curt dismissed. After Alex had filed out, the agent opened up a secure line to file his report when an incoming file cut him off. Furrowing his brow at the sight of the priority codes, he entered his own and opened up the document. By the time he finished reading, he sat back in his small chairs, eyes wide in surprise. He opened up the file sitting on the table for a long moment and then closed the stack of documents. He carried them over to the breathing room incinerator chute and dropped them in. End of Part 18. If you enjoyed this story and wish to support the author, the link is down below. If you would like to support this channel, there are numerous ways to do so. They will also be listed in the description down below. But the easiest way to help this channel is to share it, subscribe, and like. And, as always, I will see you all in the next video, and I hope that you have a good one. Cheers!